Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. This episode is sponsored by energyhealingwithspirits.com and Gayle Revels. And you'll definitely want to stay for the end of the show when Gayle describes a special offer she's put together exclusively for the BTRG audience. The thing with you writing and, how they're going to close the window and, all of that kind of thing. But extrapolate that out, for everybody who has something similar. When we're urged to do something like that, isn't it too, we agreed to that. So
Yes.
we totally agreed to that, but it's like we forgot. And so it's not like they're trying to guide us to something new or different or against
Mm-hmm.
our will. They're just
Right.
trying to shake us awake to, hey, this is one of the things on your
Yeah.
list that you made, right?
Right. It is. 100% agree with that. And I'm 100% also a proponent of, make friends with your guides. But
Yes.
also, your guides, just like your best friend, they're going to tell you things sometimes you don't want to know. But we need to know. I want to know if I'm being offensive or rude and your stranger's probably not going to tell you that, or if they are, they're going to tell you in a way that you can't accept or receive. Your best friend can tell you that in a way that you're like, oh, hard truth. And you need to sit with that. And the guides are the same way. For me in writing, again, just as an example, Sekhmet showed up for me and said, I agree to do this with you, and I'm getting mad at you. If you don't do it, I'm going to give it to somebody else. It's like, do you want to do it or not do it? I'm prepared to do this with you. This is an agreement we have. Do it or don't do it, but no more waiting around. If you don't do it, I'll give it to somebody else. And you're like,
Gayle.
okay. So I don't want her to give it to somebody else. And so she and I have had long conversations about that. And I've done some private writing, but nothing public. So it's like, you need to do it or we're going to give it to somebody else. And again, for me, and I think this comes up with a lot of my clients, it's like, who am I to channel a collective of guides that includes Sekhmet? She's not the only one. This thing that they want out in the world. And they're like, who are you? You agreed to this. We chose you. For me and the spirit work, the psychopomp work that I do, in the first class where I learned how to do this many years ago, the teacher said, hey, if you're drawn to this class, you probably have some interaction with this type of work in some past life. So she introduced us to a guide that we all have guides that shift and change over the course of our lifetime. Each lifetime, I think we have different guides. That is our guide for our soul. They work with us in every single lifetime. They may or may not be active with you in this one, but they're around all of the time. They're attached to your soul, not your incarnation. Ask that guide to show you a lifetime where you've done psychopomp. And a lot of people come back with a story and we're sharing them in class. And I went to mine, they started to giggle, which makes sense for me as a personality, but they started to giggle and they started flipping me through every single lifetime back to the beginning of time. This is what I do. This is what I am. So am I qualified to write a book about that? Yeah. Do I have guides across many lifetimes that have an opinion about that? Yeah, I do. Is the way that people are taught to do it now the same as it was in every single lifetime in the past? Absolutely not. There are so many different ways to do it. And as a teacher, it's like, I'm going to basically open some doors, introduce you to some people, but then I want you to go do it your way. Maybe it's the way you did it in a past life. Maybe it's the way your guides are telling you to do it. And so, I have something to say. I have guides that are willing to do it. And again, this is about me, but this is true for all of us. We wouldn't be nudged to do it. We wouldn't be called to do it if we couldn't do it. And most of us, I think, did agree to do it. Unless it's pure ego. which I think that's another fear. People are like, this is my ego telling me to do it. But the people who are doing it out of pure ego, they're not scared. That's
Wow.
the
That's,
person jumping out there doing it that you're looking at going, what is wrong with you? Like,
yeah.
that's not true. That's not safe. You just made that up. My guides are going, absolutely not. Um, could people doing it in good faith have different opinions and views? Absolutely. But I'm probably not thinking you're a fraud.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, that's interesting. I wouldn't do it that way.
Mm.
So if you're doubting yourself, you're probably not doing it out of ego.
I think there's just only one question after all of that, Gail, and it's, who are you not to write the book?
Thank you. But yeah,
You're welcome. You're welcome.
pushing that out. I'll accept that for me, but pushing that
Yes,
out to everybody
to
listening.
everybody else.
Why
Yeah.
not you? Why
Why
not you?
not you? And
Yeah.
don't hold back because and again, not just to you, Gail, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's like, don't hold back. Don't resist because you're keeping that from
Hmm.
everyone else.
Yeah.
All of the learning, the growth, the inspiration
Hmm.
that other people would gain
Yeah.
from having that
Hmm.
out into the world, that you're putting a cork in that. And
Yeah.
that's, yeah, we want that. We want more opportunity. So, oh yeah.
And if your guides are your friends, and I really encourage you, make your guides your friends. If your guides are your friends, then if you're not giving them voice, you're preventing your friends from being heard in the world. And
Oh,
most
yeah.
of us don't want to do that. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I might hesitate to promote me all day long, but I will promote my best friend till the cows come home. So why won't you give voice to your guides? Um,
Mm,
and there's some human fear in that. I'm going to get attacked. People are going to think I made it up, or I'm going to get accused of cultural appropriation. It's like, well, if the guides are telling you to say it, is it cultural appropriation? If I went and learned it from somebody else and I'm sharing theirs, yeah, that's appropriation. But if it comes from your guides, if it also shows up somewhere else in the world, why wouldn't it show up somewhere else in the world? We're not unique. We are, but not. We can't say that the thing I'm supposed to teach has never shown up anywhere else with any other person in all time. That that's a silly thing, but it's a fear.
yeah. Yeah. So I guess too, what I see a lot of people blocked up with when it comes to guides is the trusting and, you know, but given everything that we've talked about so far, they could have all kinds of energetic things going on with them that make contributes to the doubt or
Yeah,
contributes to them being hesitant, right?
that is totally a thing. But I also think that we're just taught that it's not true, or taught that
Yes,
it's difficult, or
that's true.
taught that and then there's all the self-doubt, which is natural human nature. Self-doubt, probably the most common question that anyone who teaches people how to talk to their guides hears is, what if I'm making it up?
Hmm.
That is probably the number one question. And my teacher used to laugh and say, make it up harder, come back with a really good story.
That's
And
funny.
I used to laugh at that. And I was like, well, I have a good imagination. And so for me as a teacher, I would say, hey, there's lots of ways to talk to your guides. You can do it through journeying or mediumship or channeling. But the easiest way to do all by yourself, everybody who's listening to this could do it. Pick up a pen and ask your question. You can write it down if you want, and then just start writing out the answer. And in the beginning, you're going to feel stupid or like you're making it up. Just keep going. Even if you start writing out, this feels awkward, stupid, I'm making it up. Okay, well, let's just make it up. I'm doing this exercise. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you're like, that didn't come from me. I wouldn't have said that to myself. I wouldn't have thought that or felt that. We all have different gifts. Maybe you are the visual one. Those are the great for journeying. Um, because you're really seeing things. I also like to journey auditorily as well. I know I'm talking to people, but I'm not seeing them. But you can do it in writing. You can do it in a conversation in your head. Um, with journeying, you're going to the guides. With mediumship or channeling, they're coming to you. So you're like, well, I'm not comfortable going out to the spirit world. I don't know what that is. So you're like, okay, ask them to come to you. Set sacred space. Make sure you're talking to an actual guide, not just random energy in the room. But yeah, so it's like there's lots of ways to play with it. And if you think you're making it up, make it up harder. And when you get an answer that you don't trust, sometimes I'm like, that's wish fulfillment. Um, Again, take my example of you should write that book. And I'm like, that's just because I've always wanted to. And I was like, but you're not doing it, even if you've always wanted to. Say, okay, if I'm really supposed to write that book, give me a sign in the 3D world. And then go see if you find that sign. You can do it really generically. Show me a sign in the 3D world. I recommend being a little bit more specific. We're always, it's kind of a joke. It's human nature to look for a sign in your sign. When I was still working for the government and the guides were telling, and I was doing spirit work on the side a little bit in the evening or on the weekend. They're like, you need to choose. I'm like, I did choose. I'm choosing spirit work. They're like, no, you need to choose your job or spirit work. And I'm like, well, I'm a single person in San Francisco. I need a certain amount of money to live. They're like, you have to choose. And I'm like, I'm kind of scared of that. So I kept playing with that choice for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. So don't feel bad if it takes you a while. And I kept asking for a sign. I would get sign after sign after sign. I would ignore it. That's not really a sign. It's just, coincidence. And finally, I was at a point where I really did have to choose. Was I going to accept a permanent job because my consulting work was ending and go back to work full time? Or was I going to choose the spirit work? I asked for another sign. In San Francisco, they sometimes put advertising on sides of buses. And everybody knows the Nike slogan, just do it. I'd never seen a Nike ad on a bus before. I walk out of the office I worked in, there goes the bus with Nike across the entire length of a city bus. Just do it. I was like, okay, I guess I have to accept that as a sign. But be specific. I told a client once that she was supposed to do something that she really wanted to do. She's like, no, that's wish fulfillment. So ask for a sign in the 3D world. And she lived in the suburbs. She goes, I got to take the dog for a walk next time, when we hang up here. So I'm going to ask for, if I'm really supposed to do this, show me a pink feather boa. And I was like, okay, that's going to be kind of difficult in the suburbs, walking the dog in your neighborhood. But I was like, all right, there's your sign. Literally 20 minutes after we hung up, she emailed me back. There was a pink feather boa on the corner by my house. So make it hard for them, make them work for it, but ask for a sign.
Wow. That is really creative, on that side. Wow. That's amazing. So, so we've talked about that kind of resistance, to making the change and being bigger. I call it
Yeah.
playing bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, I told you when you first mentioned it, I'm seeing that too. I'm feeling that more, and I think we can really agree about that because,
Yeah.
we're in the times right now. Everything's different. I just feel like there's so much possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say too, a lot of us are just kind of tired.
Yeah.
So we do want to just go take a nap. So I can relate to that too. I get it. But the second thing that you said about the magic pill and, paying other people to do that, I had said, well, wow, I can relate to that too.
Mm-hmm.
Because probably in relation to what I just said too, it's like, I'm tired,
Yeah.
life is hard sometimes, and it's like, wow, if I can outsource that,
Yeah.
I want to,
Wouldn't it be nice?
outsource that. Yeah. So I totally get that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember years ago, this is just silly, but I remember years ago, I was in a Target or something and I'm pushing my basket and I'm in the, sports aisle or whatever. And I look over and there's this ab roller thing or some sort of ab thing. And I look at it and I thought to myself, if all I had to do was buy it, oh, I'd so just buy that right
Isn't that
now
true?
and look like that lady on the on the package. I wish it was that easy. But I'll never forget that because I mean, that was like really my moment of you just can't do that. And so I would really like to hear more about that
Mhm.
um, from you. And then if we can't do that, what do we do? I mean, if we're ready to acknowledge we can't just buy it and get the six pack abs,
Mhm.
ugh, unfortunately, um, then how can we help people and become empowered, become and we use the word a couple times, but sovereign. And can you maybe that's a good place for us to start, Gail, is what does it mean to be sovereign? Because right at the beginning of the episode, when I was introducing you, that was part of the bio. So it's
Mhm.
got to be quite central
Yeah.
to what you focus on in your work. And so, yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about sovereignty. What does that mean
Yeah.
to you?
Sovereignty means that we have the right to make our own choices about what is best for us and what we want to do. And when we have things like a curse saying that we're not allowed to be visible, it means I'm not allowed to choose to be visible. When we have a group of this would be a big group, but we have a group of 100 ancestors that are not crossed over, that are moving around the line, helping people with big choices, who really think that women should get married and move to the country and raise horses. And what I really want to do is IT and live in the big city. I'm not sovereign if there's always a nagging voice in the back of my head telling me I have to get married and move to the country. If I'm always tired because I'm hosting these other beings, um, I'm not actually sitting in my own energy. So for me, what I like to do when I'm talking about sovereignty is what is with us that impacts our ability to choose for ourselves. And that's what I'm looking for. Is it an old contract? Is it that I don't have any boundaries? Is it that I doubt myself because I hear my mom in the back of my head saying, "That's a great hobby. What's your day job?" Which is what I got told about writing when I wanted to write as a kid. It's a great hobby. What's your day job? So now I
Mm,
was like, okay, well, if I don't see as many clients and I spend more time writing, who's going to pay the rent? What's my day job? So I was like, oh, that's not me. That's my mother. Right.
mhm.
So can I work enough hours to do both with client work and writing? Absolutely can. I know I can. I've proved I can, but I still have that voice in the back of my head saying writing is a hobby. What's your day job? That's impinging on my sovereignty. So here's where we get to that magic wand or magic pill. Is that a mindset issue? Do I need to go talk that through in therapy to clear that? Or is my mom still here as a spirit telling me that's my day job? If my mom's still here as a spirit, I can help you with that. If that's a mindset issue, that's not energy work. That's your homework. How do you change your mindset? And there's lots of ways to change mindset. I'm not saying you have to go to therapy, but I also can't fix that for you. You have to do that. So, like your ab roller, you know, you can buy it. It's not going to give you six pack abs unless you do it. So it's
Mhm.
the same with me. I can teach you all these energy hygiene exercises that will help you have clear energy. I can teach you how to disconnect from energy fields because that's where a lot of people get stuck. They connect to an energy field, then they're constantly feeling the energy in the field. Um, then you have to do it. If you don't do it, then you make another appointment with me a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later and say, the energy came back. Can you disconnect me from the field? Sure, I can do that. But that just means every month you come ask me to disconnect you from that same field. Um, is it working? Yes, but it's temporary. Or you come back to me and say, your work didn't work. Therefore, I want a full refund. I'm still connected to that field. And I was like, you have to disconnect from the field. I showed you how. My work worked, but you still have to disconnect from your field. So, and that's kind of where we see that kind of disconnect. It's like you still have to do your own. You can't, or you can. I have one person who really helps people regulate their nervous system. She's fabulous, but she has a couple of clients that shows up every week, and she says I do the same work every single week because they refuse to do their own hygiene, and she's frustrated and irritated. And when people do that with me, I'm frustrated and irritated too. It's the fastest way to get me to drop you as a client that exists. I will do the big crazy scary being. I won't do that. It's
Right.
boring for
Yeah.
me.
Hmm.
So it's not that you don't need help, but you still have to have some sovereignty. You're not claiming your own body, your own energy field. Some things we need help with. Some things we just have to do ourselves. Um, yeah, like
Yeah.
you can
That's
buy
really
the
true.
you can buy the machine, but you got to use it.
Yep. Oh, I know. I bet a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh yeah, I have a ton of exercise equipment in my
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
But and also I find when people like a sign that you're not doing your own work is problem that never goes away. So
Oh.
and which is it's a funny sign because sometimes the problem that never goes away may mean you have a big structural problem, and maybe it's a curse, maybe it's a being. But
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
if you have done the structural work, or the opposite, you've done the mindset work, you've been to therapy, you've done the meditation groups, you're a guru and all sorts of different self-help things, and it doesn't ever work. Those are my favorite clients, honestly, because they're the ones that do kind of have the effect of the magic pill because they've done all the work. I just removed the curse. You've done all the rest of your work. It's clear. It's clear forever. You never have to think about it again. Those are the people who are like, you changed my life. And I did one piece of it, but it's all the other work that they've been doing that makes it so. If you show up with me as the first thing and you haven't done the rest, you're like, it didn't work. Um, and it's like, well, actually, it's always a combination of all the things we've been doing. And sure, I love it when I'm the miracle, but it's never just me.
I love that we're actually talking about this because I think it's so relatable and so true,
Yeah.
and I think probably most people could see where they've done this in their own life, whether it's healing or ab rollers or, whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, do you want the power or
Hmm.
don't you?
Right.
Right? You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
Because how I kind of put it to people is I say, you don't come into this life as a leaf on a stream.
Hmm.
You come into this life with free will, and it's baked in that you get to decide. And I really do believe that. I think it can take people a long time to realize that, or be ready to realize that. And I think too, it can be scary for people because if they're not, the victim of this, that, and the next, uh-oh,
If it's not
then
somebody else's fault, then it has to be mine, and nobody wants it to be mine.
that's right. Nobody wants that. And then that means every day after that, you're living with that awareness.
Hmm.
It's you then have a bar, you then, what does that even mean? It might not sound like how I mean it, but what I mean is there's a standard then for yourself,
Yeah.
to show up, to be responsible, to be whatever.
Hmm.
You're just not asleep anymore,
Right.
which a lot of people I think want to be asleep,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
it's
From
sleeping time's over.
Yeah, wake up. The guys are saying, "Hey, wake up. Do the thing you wanted to do. The thing you've always wanted to do since you were a kid." I Most of us are like for me when I was a kid, I wanted to write novels, and I still kind of do. But they're like, writing has been a thing for me since birth. So yeah, of course I'm getting told to write. What's that thing that you've always wanted to do since you were a little kid? I bet it has something to do with why you're here.
Mm, yeah.
Um, for me, sovereignty is standing in your power. And can you stand in your power if you haven't defined what it is you actually want? So I think
Mm.
sometimes we haven't been specific about what we want, and that makes it really hard to manifest it or do it. Um, so it's like if you stay really Generic has a value judgment. So, and I mean no value judgment with this, but if your goal is, hey, I just want to be happy. What does happy mean to you? Does happy mean I have a job that I love? Does happy mean that I have a lot of money? Does happy mean I have a healthy relationship? Does happy mean I live at the beach and I can get my feet wet every day? What does happy mean to you? And I find, in terms of standing in your power, which we have to do to be sovereign, we have to define what it is we want. So, so it kind of falls into sovereignty in a weird kind of way. It's like sovereignty is, yeah, not having other things impacting our choices. But if you don't ever make a choice, can you be sovereign? And choices need to be a little bit more specific than I want to be happy. Meaning, and that's can still be your goal, but how do you define it? If happy means I live close to the beach with enough money to not worry about it, then yeah, you can say I want to be happy because you've defined it. What is happy? But if you haven't defined it, it's hard to ever have it.
That's tough, Gail.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of tough because knowing what you want, yeah, at
and
least
it
for
can,
me, maybe I'm weird, but I think that's kind of hard. It's a tough question.
but it can change. So, like, what do I want this week versus the 5 year plan versus for like my soul? I would
Mm.
have a horrible time telling you what I wanted at that level. Even for my lifetime, I would have a horrible time telling you what I want because I'm too much of a manifesting generator. I want 12 things. But but defining some of our terms is a powerful thing. It also can keep us active. So if I just want to be happy, I don't have anything to work for to get it. How do I get my happiness? So for me, like setting goals, and I actually really like recommending clients set shorter term goals. So it's a fun manifestation exercise, but I also just think it's a fun sovereignty exercise, and it keeps me out of my head, but doing something not just in my head. So say we set a goal of, I did this exercise the very first time when I was thinking, okay, I want my very first paid client. So I made that kind of my, I would be happy if I had my very first paid client, right? So is that my life goal? No. But, my goal at that moment in time. So I wanted my very first paid client. For this class, we had a 30 days between classes. So I was like, okay, in the next 30 days, I want to manifest my first paid client. And the homework was every morning before you get out of bed, ask your guides, what can I do today to get my first paid client? Um, and I put a date on it instead of 30 days because I want to keep the 30 days to keep moving. It was like, hey, how do I have my first paid client before November 1st? And every day they would give me something to do. And that kept me out of just being in my head. And that's something to do. Maybe it's related to getting your first client or logically related. It might be, hey, tell your friends you want your first paid client. But it might also be, hey, go for a walk today. Does that feel related? No, but that was what my guides told me to do today. So every day I did something. It's like a way of kind of embodying your goals, dreams, manifestations. It's one of my favorite exercises to do for myself when I find, which is why I was say, okay, I'll make a commitment to write one article. I've just given myself a deadline. I've said what it is. It's measurable. Um, Knowing me, I'll wait to the last minute, but maybe we'll put that out there. I'll try, maybe I'll break that down into smaller goals and push that deadline forward. So, but giving yourself, asking your guides builds your relationships with your guides, builds that friendship. It builds trust. You're asking them for something to do, they're giving it to you, and you're doing it. Goes both ways because the guides are like, she won't do it anyway. It's like, no, I'm proving I will do it. So they have to trust us just like we have to trust them. Friendship is a two-way street.
I really like how you just put that because I think when it's ourselves, when we think up, oh, I just keep going back to this and I just need to apologize right now, but I'm just going to go back to it. I'm going to use my ab roller
Yeah.
every day for, whatever. And I make that promise to myself. Oh, I
Hmm.
can break that. so
Yeah.
easily.
So fast.
But I really like how you just talked about the guides and how it's a relationship and don't break your word.
Right.
So I think that in and of itself can be a really powerful decision that people make is,
Hmm.
I'm going to build a relationship with my guides, even if I'm at the 0 point today. I'm going to start investing my time and energy in learning how to communicate with my guides because other people do it, you
Yeah.
know, other people do it. If they can do it, you can do it. I mean, that's
Everyone
it.
can do it.
Everybody can do it. Nobody is left out here.
No.
And so if we decide I'm going to invest some time, I'm going to do this every day, 20 minutes or whatever it is, that's an appointment, you know?
Right.
And I think people would, or I would hope people would keep those appointments
Hmm.
because it's not just you that you're letting down.
Right. And it can be fast, you know, it can be 20 minutes for sure, but it doesn't have to be. I find, especially with physical things for me, is I'm sore. So the reason I didn't do it is because I don't feel good. And I do want to honor and respect my own body. But so it's like, one is what you're trying to do realistic. So you want to think about that. And you can also ask your guides, hey, is this a realistic thing? Or is it better for me to say, hey, I'm going to check in with you every Saturday morning before I get out of bed? Because I don't have to get up and get the kids ready for school. So I'm more likely to do it. Or maybe it's before I go to bed instead of before I get up. Like, what's realistic? Negotiate that with your team. But also, like for me, this ask your guides every day, it could be, a long journey or I spend a lot of time with them when maybe what they're telling me to do is I need to do soul retrieval. So then I have to stay and actually do soul retrieval. But it can also be, go for a walk today. You're in and out of that conversation 30 seconds flat and you're off with your day. It doesn't have to be like a big time consuming thing. I think, and I was really guilty of this in the beginning because when I first learned how to talk to my guides, it was all through journeying. And journeying is very ritualistic. And so there's a time commitment that goes into that. You have to set sacred space. You still should do no matter what. So please don't make that your time. So set sacred space. And then I have to drum. And then I have to go down through the world tree into the lower world. And then I have to visit different landscapes to find a guide, to then ask questions, and so it's ceremonial and it takes a long time. Um, which I'm more mediumistic. So I like to channel as my primary method of communication with the guides. So I still set sacred space, which can be really fast. But then it's just I'm in and out. I ask my questions, they come to me, I'm back out. It's really, really fast. So do what feels good to you. There is no, I had a novel, it was Mercedes Lackey. She says, there's no one true way. And it was in this fantasy world. And it's kind of become my mantra in energy work. There's no one true way. It's your guides, it's you, it's your gifts, it's your circumstances, it's your limitations, it's your dreams, goals, agreements. There's no one true way.
Yeah, because I think so many people, and I have done this too in my life, certainly, where I don't think I know. And so
Right.
I need to, how does this person do it? How does that person do it? And look in every direction, under every rock, you know. And I think a lot of us do that. And I think it's normal.
It's
But
normal up to a
yeah.
certain point, and then it becomes distraction or a reason not to do the thing because it becomes a perfectionist thing. What's the
Yeah.
perfect way?
Yes.
Instead of just jump in, do it, and go, that didn't feel very good. Next time I'll do something different.
Yes.
Um, but you have to trust that you're safe. If I jump in and do it and it doesn't feel good, am I still safe? Um, if I still feel safe and I would just do it differently next time, no harm, no foul. I just not my preferred method.
Right.
Versus I jumped in, I came out slimed and needed energy work and had to pay someone to help me. And then that's like, yeah, no, now I have much bigger investment on not doing it that way. Yeah.
Interesting. Because what just entered my mind again was the fear,
Fear.
right? Is
Yeah.
that fear. Yeah. Mm.
Which is why for me, everything always starts with meet your guides, build a relationship, and then you always have someone you trust with you that you can always bounce an idea off of that will help you if you run into problems. Um, said this in classes all the time. We all have places in our general where we live that aren't maybe the safest. You might go there during the day by yourself, but you might not wander around there by yourself after dark. Maybe isn't the safest place, but you might go to a nice dinner in that neighborhood with a friend. You just wouldn't go by yourself. So meet your guides, make friends, and then you can go anywhere because you're not doing it alone.
That's big, especially right now. There are so many people that feel like they're alone. You know, I thought of this earlier too, Gail, and I'm kind of going off on a little tangent, but I thought about earlier when we were talking, people have gone through entire lifetimes, right? With all sorts of energy influences, and they never knew. They
Yeah,
never knew. And I guess too, people in today's world are doing this too, and they're having difficulty, or maybe, mental illness is, they're diagnosed with mental illness, but that could actually be a spiritual of spiritual origin, right? Of this
can be.
sort of energetic interference.
I think mental illness often has a spiritual component. Again, definitely do not want to say 100%, but depression, for example, depression can have so many sources. If you just look at the Western medical world, sometimes it's a chemical imbalance. Sometimes it's our life circumstances truly suck, and of course we're depressed. Has nothing to do with a chemical imbalance. Sometimes now you start adding the spiritual component. Maybe I'm hosting 100 ancestors, and some of them are kind of sad about the state of the world. They're sad, I'm sad. Nothing to do with me at all. Now you have a spiritual component. Now you take someone who is gifted. Maybe they're clairauditory. They have 100 spirits around them. They can hear them. They give voice to them. Maybe their boundaries aren't so good and the spirit ends up taking over sometimes. Are you schizophrenic, or are you hearing voices? Are you gifted, or is it mental illness? And that is a fine line. Um, I see some clients who are actually actively suicidal. Um, they'll come to me thinking maybe it's energy work, and maybe it is. Maybe you have a spirit with you that is just like, I hate being in the human world. I want out of here so bad. We clear them, they leave. You never feel suicidal again because it wasn't you that was suicidal, it was them that was suicidal. Um, I've seen an example of a client who unfortunately committed suicide not long after our appointment, which was horrible for me and definitely not the type of client I prefer working with. But she had a curse on her, and she had basically made a vow that when that curse kept her getting reincarnated in a human body, and she was having a horrible experience. And so she said, she had made a vow that when this curse was removed, she was never coming back again. We removed that curse. She was free, and she was free. She's like, I'm out. Now you cannot make me stay here. And I did not know that at the time. Otherwise, the session would have been very, very different because I don't want people to come see me and then commit suicide. That is not something that I wish to be a part of as a practitioner, a space holder. Her sister called me after she died, and we actually did some mediumship with her sister after she crossed. And she had all this love and messages she wanted to give her sister. But she's like, there's nothing that could have made me stay. When that was healed for me, and I so appreciate the healing, there was nothing that could make me stay.
There's really, I just am speechless about that.
Yeah. And that was towards the beginning of my career, and that was traumatic for me. As a practitioner, you never want a client to commit suicide. Just the emotional impact of that is horrifying.
Yes.
Then you start thinking about the legal impact of that the liability of that as a practitioner. That's not something any practitioner ever wants. And yet that was when it happened, I was horrified. when we started doing mediumship, it was such a gift for that. The messages that came out of that was such a gift, and it was such a teaching for me that some people went out of here so mad that I could clear something, then they could leave free and clear, and there was so much joy in that for them, and so much pain in that for those left behind. Um, but how do you do with that? How do you sit with that? How do you process that?
Yeah, but that's really interesting too, Gail, because you do that for the spiritual energy,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
You do the work and then they leave
and then
where
they
they've
leave.
been. So, yeah, it's like the mirror image
Hmm.
of that in a way.
Yeah,
But what a wonderful gift that you had the opportunity to do the mediumship
yeah,
because, wow, that really brought everything full circle.
it's full circle. So, like for me as a practitioner, I get asked this a lot, and didn't really come up today. Is the client the being or the human?
Yes.
Is the
Yeah.
client the
Yeah.
being or the human?
Yep.
That example is the perfect. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
who's the
Yes.
client? Um,
Oh, yeah. That
so
that is something to really ponder. Yeah.
yeah. And obviously, not everybody does my type of work. It's honestly not that common that people do this type of work that I do. But as a practitioner, no matter what type of energy work that you do, who is your client? And the knee jerk reaction is, of course, the client is the person who paid me, right? But is that really your client? For me, it's not always. I would say the being that is stuck here is often the client. And by helping them, I'm helping the person who paid me. So it's not like I'm not helping that person, but I can't help that person without helping the being. And I'm doing more than just removing the being from the client sitting in front of me. I'm doing whatever that being needs to get full and complete healing, because that being is my client just as much as the human sitting in front of me. And yeah, I can justify that. I can say I have to help that being. One, it's the morally, ethically right thing to do. But also, if I don't actually help them go home, I just remove them from you, then somebody else then picks them up because they can't get home without help. So you're either giving that problem to your neighbor or your family member, or they come back to you because they know you. They're not bound to you anymore, but they know you. So they'll just come back and stay with you. So long term, it helps you by helping them, but I'm really helping.
Just incredible. Incredible.
Yeah.
Gail, we've really talked about so many different things that can affect someone's energy and all the different things that you clear. But if somebody comes, I mean, everything it isn't the magic pill, right? So if they come to you for an appointment and then they go and they feel great or they feel a difference or something like that, do you typically see them again? Is everything fixed? Can everything be fixed with one appointment?
Yeah. Um, Things can be fixed with one appointment, and it's fabulous when that happens. And not everything is my work to do. So sometimes people will show up with me and I will undo the curse, and that's all that's mine to do. Then they go back to therapy or their Reiki practitioner or their shamanic healer, and they don't need to stay with me. So they may still only see me once, and that's great. Some people see me a few more times than once. It's rare for people to see me more than 3 or 4 times, at least close together. The But the work can be layered. Sometimes you'll come to me with usually it's an issue. You might say, "Hey, I'm having a hard time with my relationships." And the guides will say, "Yeah, you do have a few things there. There's some ancestors with an opinion. There's maybe an ancestral curse around who is worthy or the perceptions people have of you. Maybe there's a past life thing around standing in your power, something like that." And so we might clear, say, 3 or 4 things in a 2-hour session. And what I tell clients when they do that with me is, I was like, this needs to integrate. So you'll feel most of the change over the first 24, 48 hours, but it will integrate over 1 or 2 weeks. If at the end of a week or two, you're like, hey, these 3 or 4 things feel better and this thing still feels like it's a problem, then they should come back. And maybe another layer of the work. The guides generally won't tell me more than can be done in one session, sometimes 2 sessions. They'll say that this needs to be in 2 sessions, but this is the work. And then it really needs to integrate. And then if it's not bothering you, you don't need to come back. I don't need to tell you your entire life's work in one session. That's really overwhelming. And we may never need to say that you have a curse saying you're not allowed to be self employed. If you never want to be self employed, it doesn't matter. It's not until you're like, oh, I want to be self employed. Why isn't this working? That you're like, oh, there's a curse here. And they'll go find that. So, so generally, people would see me once or twice and we would clear whatever is up for you now. And then life moves on and you try and do something new and you're like, oh, this isn't working. So I tell people, if you suddenly are like, I'm really tired again for no reason, or life is just out of flow, I can't seem to make things work, or I feel blocked in this area, then come back. So you might see me, a couple times now and again in a year when things change in your life. So, but again, the work is not a magic pill. I'm not going to fix everything that could possibly go wrong in your entire life in one session. And sometimes work has to be done in a certain order. Maybe the underlying thing is a big ancestral curse, but that curse maybe is 1,200 years old. And over the course of that 1,200 years, the family has attracted beings and ancestors with problems and coping mechanisms that created thought forms. And so I was like, I can't see the actual curse that's the real problem until we clear the beings that got created and the thought forms that created coping mechanisms. And then once that's clear and you're like, yeah, but I still feel like there's a problem, then it's like, oh, well, now I can see the curse. And it's not that we missed it the first time. It's just it's so much layered on top of it that we had to get through those to actually see the thing underneath that was the root cause. And sometimes we need to learn some things along the way. So maybe we need to learn how to set boundaries. And because we don't have any boundaries, or maybe the curse says we're not allowed to have boundaries. Maybe the curse is you're going to attract beings and spend your entire life clearing beings. And that curse's intention was maybe set because it was distraction. If I'm constantly dealing with beings, then I can't do whatever it is they're trying to get me not to see or do. So if I have a curse saying I'm going to be constantly clearing beings, I can clear everything that's with you because that's what I see. And you're like, and I was fine for about 2 weeks. And then there just got more and more and more and more. And you're like, did they come back? They might have. Well, that's really unusual. Usually what's happened is we've just collected more things. They're like, oh, she's available now. You cleared your waiting list. So now we're going to queue up and wait for you to help us. And if I see that like 2 times in a row where people have a lot of beings, I'm like, okay, why? Why do you have a lot of beings? I might not be seeing it, but there's probably an underlying reason for that. Because again, that's not normal. And I know it's not normal just because I do this all of the time. If you go to someone who doesn't do this all the time, they're just like, wow, you have a lot of beings. They don't realize how unusual it is. So that's kind of examples of why sometimes, so the first time we did it, I was like, oh, okay. And the second time, I'm like, that's unusual. Let me teach you some boundaries. Maybe you're gifted and you can hear them and feel them. And so they're just talking to you because you have space. And so it's like, if I teach you how to make them not be constantly up in your energy and it still happens, then it's not a boundary issue. There's an underlying structural problem. So I think that a lot of us do need some energy boundaries. We humans in general don't have good boundaries at all. We aren't really taught them as kids. We have to learn them more as adults. I see some people now teaching their kids boundaries, and I'm cheering them on. Please continue to do that. That's wonderful. But we have the same right with our energy boundaries, just like we do in our physical boundaries. We can tell people they're not allowed to talk to us a certain way or treat us a certain way. Certain people aren't allowed in our houses or in our physical spaces. And those are physical kind of 3D realm boundaries. But we can do the same thing with the spirit realm. Just because I can hear everything doesn't mean everything's allowed to talk to me at all times. It's crazy making. So for me, I have boundaries about what is allowed to talk to me. If it's in session and it's related to the session, you're allowed to talk to me. If I'm walking down the street and you're just like, oh, she can hear me, I don't want to talk to you usually. Um, you know, that's a little distracting. People think I'm a little weird talking to myself. And I think that, so for me, it's like, hey, if it's about my physical safety or it's about me specifically, if you're like, Gayle, I haven't seen you in forever, I really want to talk to you, sure, you can talk to me. If it's, oh, you can hear me and this person's crazy or I need help getting out of here, that's not the time or the space. I don't allow it. My boundaries say no. So I'm highly sensitive. So I definitely qualify as HSP. I think a lot of your listeners probably do too. So for me as an HSP, again, remember, I'm really physically embodied sensitive. So if I walk into a room as an HSP, I can feel the energy of the room. And so if I walk into the room and somebody is angry, I want to know somebody's angry, but I don't want to feel angry. My gifts and the HSP combined would make me feel angry when I walked into the room. And I'm like, whoa, that's not okay with me. I don't want to be angry. I'm not angry. So I might say as a boundary, hey, I want to know the energy of the room. I don't want to feel the energy of the room. So I think most people who are sensitive need some type of boundary. Otherwise, we just kind of get overwhelmed by the energies of the world. Right now, especially in the United States around the election, I know this is airing just before and I think just after the election. So, in fact, it might be airing so soon we don't even know the results yet. So, the collective energy is going to be really high.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I don't want the collective energy pushing me around. I have my own thoughts about the election, who should win, who should not, how scary or not scary that is. I can sit with my own, I own that. That's my work, right? But the collective energy around it needs to stay out of my energy field. That's a boundary. How do you separate from that? That's hygiene. So, learning how to set boundaries, learning how to do some energy hygiene to keep yourself sovereign, keep yourself free and clear and able to make your own decisions, not pushed around by the energy around us, is really important. So, for me, whenever I work with clients, it's like, hey, you're sensitive. We're going to clear you off today. Hopefully, you're going to feel 100% better. If you're still feeling off, we need to think about whether or not you need to learn boundaries or you need another session. And it could really go either way. And the client is the best gauge of that. If you're like, nope, it's still related to, say, relationships in general. And relationships in general are still an issue for me. That's probably not a boundary. That's probably another layer in the work. If you're like, I just can't sleep at night after our work, I just feel like somebody's watching me, or I just feel kind of energetic, my buzzing. Buzzing is usually a sign of boundaries. Could be a being that's making you buzz, but usually it's our energy body is reflecting other energy around us. So it's like, how do we make ourselves again sovereign? How do you make me, and you, but me not carry you? And that's a boundary.
Yeah, that's sovereignty, right? Again, and
Yeah,
the boundaries I think are so important. I mean, you mentioned about what we're taught,
yeah.
and boy, as a child, it was you respected your elders,
Do what
everything
you're
was
told.
about accommodating everybody else.
Yeah,
So I think um for me for sure, but I'm sure many others it's uh, different, to
yeah,
be assertive energetically. I mean,
right.
in the 3D world is one thing, and then to take that into the energetic realm, wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty incredible to even think about. And then, um,
Thinking about what is allowed, it's
mm,
like, I allow my best friend can call me at midnight. I would answer the phone. Do I let a telemarketer call me at midnight? Absolutely not. So it's like, that's a boundary. What is allowed?
mhm,
What is not allowed? In the spirit realm, again, I believe everybody's reincarnated. So, and I think a lot of us that are really sensitive, especially practitioners, we were sensitive in past lives. We were practitioners in past lives. So we might have had things that were allowed in the past, and that permission continues into this lifetime. Teachers are a great example of that. In the past, usually we didn't have as many students as we have today. You might have a set of students that you mentored for 5 or 10 years, and then you got a new set for 5 or 10 years. You might have 5 students over your entire lifetime. Well, now our classes are 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 people a class. I do a different class once a month. Um, so my boundaries in a past life might have been my students always have access to me. They can ping me energetically at any time. I'm always responsive to my students. In this lifetime, if you teach for a full year and you're like, I'm going crazy, everybody has access to me, I can't keep them out. I say I don't want them to, but they still keep getting in. It's like you have to go back and say, hey, students from past lives no longer have access to me. Students in this lifetime only have access during the class. Like just like changing your permissions, changing your boundaries. I find that setting a boundary now isn't, if it doesn't work, it's frustrating. I don't mean to discount that, but it's information. It's like, well, why didn't that work? And for me, a lot of times what I'm finding is we have old agreements or old permission that could be from this lifetime, but it could also be carrying forward from our past lifetimes. So it's like needing to change those permissions so that our boundaries in this lifetime can work a little bit better.
And we wouldn't necessarily need a clearing for that, right? We could
No,
reset the boundaries on our own,
yes,
correct?
definitely.
Ah, well, I think that's a whole other area. I mean, that
Mhm.
seems like, well, number one, it seems life changing to be able to set and manage boundaries the way you've been talking about. I mean, that could literally change somebody's life to have
Definitely.
better boundaries. But I think it's also, we need help with that.
Yeah.
We need help knowing how to do that. Um, and what's possible for
Yeah.
us, right? And actually even how to do that.
Mhm.
And you mentioned classes and you teach some different classes. What for somebody to learn with you,
Right.
um, is there an entry point for that, or can you help us understand how we might get started?
Yeah. So for me, being able to talk to your guides is number one. All of my work is like, hey, let's talk to our guides about how to do that. Let's get information or options, see what they think about this or that, collecting information. So if we are going to set boundaries, for me, it's I want people to be able to talk to their guides, and then the guides help set their boundaries. If you need to change old permission, it's can you ask your guides to go back and change those for you? So our guides can do a lot of stuff for us if we know how to ask or what to ask for. And so learning how to talk to your guides and then learning how to frame questions is really, really important. So for me, if you want to work with me as a student and not just have me clear for you and then go away and do your own thing, I really want people to be able to talk to their guides. And if you already know how to do that, you don't have to learn it from me. So if you are already a really good medium or channel or you know how to journey, great. You don't need to do it with me. But if you don't, or if you want to talk about how I do it, maybe differently than how you were originally taught, starting with a talking to your guides class is the great place to start. And I teach every month for 2 or 3 hours. Usually it's the second Saturday of the month. And talking to your guides is the prereq for everything. So once you know how to do that, then you can come play with me, maybe talk about boundaries or hygiene or mediumship. You can join a mediumship circle after you've taken the talking to your guides class. But you can also play with other things. Like I've learned that this isn't the topic for today so much, but we've learned how to maybe give ourselves shortcuts to things like, hey, if there's ancestors around, make the top of my head tingle. It tells me immediately my head's tingling, there's ancestors around. Or, hey, my third eye hurts. That tells me that you have a block to seeing. Or, oh, there's energy sitting at the back of my head. That tells me there's a mythical being attached to the client. And for me, I call that body mapping, where we've kind of set shortcuts in our physical body. For me, the way I learned how this for myself is I sneeze if there's a spirit within my energy body. So for me, my boundaries say, hey, you have to stay out of my energy body. But if I randomly sneeze for no reason, it means there's a spirit that has stepped into my energy body, which again, I don't want them to do that. So it's tells me when that has happened. It's like a shortcut way of knowing instead of going, oh, that feels weird. Why is that weird? Let me go ask these questions. Like it's a really fast way of knowing. So for me, I call that body mapping. So, but that's a weekend workshop. You could come for 2 or 3 hours and learn more about body mapping and then learn, did I do any of those for myself or can I set some for myself, change ones I've already have? And those, I call them fun, those fun types of workshops. I think the one coming up in January is, am I really human? Because I think we aren't all completely human. So what am I if I'm not completely human? That's the fun one for coming up in January. So for me, I love, teaching people how to talk to their guides because that's primary, but then you can use that skill to learn how to amend your own past agreements, change your own boundaries, get help holding your boundaries so that they stay up all of the time. Really start doing all of these things. We talked in the beginning about how I say, hey, you can't hire out all of your work. Sometimes you have to do some of your own. Your guides can help you with your work, but to do that, you have to be able to talk to them. So for me, the entry point is always talking to your guides.
Wow, that is really helpful. And that class in January, I mean, you come up with the neatest things, I have to say. Uh,
It's fun. And if there's
yeah.
anything anyone ever wants to do, they're like, I really wish we're also talking to the spirit of money the end of October. So,
Oh,
so it's like if you are a medium or you have strong channeling skills, you can join a mediumship circle to talk to the spirit of money. So it's stuff that comes up. And that was a business mediumship class. Money kept coming up over and over and over again. And I was like, we don't have time to do this today, but we should talk to the spirit of money. So if they're like, I really wish I could do that or this, let me know. We'll work that into a fun weekend workshop or a mediumship circle.
oh, that sounds amazing. And Gail, can you share your website with them? And I believe you have an offer for our listeners as well, if you don't mind explaining it to them, because, um, sign me up. But
Yeah,
please tell us your website.
yeah, come play. So my website is energyhealingwithspirits and .com. And I work with spirits with everything, and that's what they wanted to name the business. So I know it's long, but it's just one word, energyhealingwithspirits.com. And you're welcome to come play with me in individual session or with workshops. And for listeners of this podcast, you can use the code BTRG25 and it'll give you $25 off any class or individual session with me. And you can use that code one time. Anyone who has used it from the first podcast, I'm going to clear that so that you can use it again.
That's wonderful, Gail.
Yeah.
And I just have to say this too. After you were on the first time, the response was amazing. And I cannot tell you how many people r- actually got back to me and said they had a session. And I heard the most amazing stories from
Mhm.
people and different things that they discovered about themselves, about the work and the results, I have to say. I mean, it was incredible. The different things that your past clients and
Mhm.
people in my orbit shared with me. And, I just thank them, for letting me know. Because as we engage with energy more and more and share, I think, what's possible and what's
Mhm.
happening, I think it just helps bring it more, um, well, for lack of a better term, into the mainstream so that we are more empowered and we can see that we have so much say in our experience here and so much power. And I just love the themes that we've talked about,
Mhm.
the sovereignty and the boundaries and um, really fulfilling what we came here to do. And I just thank you so much for being here and offering your generous discount for our listeners. I think that's a beautiful thing to
Thank you.
gift to them.
Thank you. Thank you. I really have loved meeting the people through this podcast. I love working with people who have some understanding of spirit work already, and you really provide that with what you're doing here. So thank you very much for letting me talk to your audience here.
Oh, just our pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you so much, Gayle.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.